Hey, everyone. Imagine this. A crowded bus in the middle of a hot summer day, people crammed in, no seats left, and the air thick with tension. A young black teen, just trying to get home after a long day, notices a pregnant white woman struggling to stand, her face pale, her hands gripping the rail for dear life. Without a second thought, he gets up, offers her a seat, and flashes a shy smile. She looks at him, grateful, and as she sits down, she slips a folded piece of paper into his hand. He doesn't think much of it at first, just a kind gesture, right? But when he opens that note later, his world turns upside down. What was written on that piece of paper? How could a simple act of kindness lead to something so life-changing? Stick with me, because this story is about to take you on a wild ride, one that spans decades, uncovers secrets, and shows how a single moment can rewrite someone's entire life. It all starts in 1981, in a small, sleepy town where everyone knows everyone, and nothing big ever happens, or so they thought. Three young triplets, barely 10 years old, were the heart of their community. Their names were Malik, Marcus, and Micah, three boys with bright eyes, infectious laughs, and a bond so tight it seemed nothing could break it. Their mom, Angela, was a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, but she always made time to tuck them in at night, telling them stories of hope and courage. The triplets were known for their kindness, always helping neighbors, sharing their snacks, and sticking together like glue. But one humid afternoon in August, everything changed. The boys were playing near the edge of town, close to the old oak tree by the river, when they vanished. No trace, no clues, just gone. The town searched for weeks. Police, volunteers, even bloodhounds, but it was like the earth had swallowed them whole. Angela was shattered, clinging to hope but haunted by questions. Where were her boys? Were they scared? Were they even alive? The years rolled by, and the mystery of the triplets' disappearance became a ghost story in the town, whispered about but never solved. Angela never gave up. She kept their room exactly as it was, their favorite toys still on the shelves, their clothes folded in the drawers. Every year on their birthday, she'd bake a cake and sit by the window, praying for a miracle. The town moved on, but Angela couldn't. She carried the weight of their absence like a stone in her chest, her hope fading but never dying. Meanwhile, life went on elsewhere. In a big city miles away, a young man named Jordan was growing up, unaware of the shadows of 1981 that would one day crash into his life. Jordan was 17, a good kid with a big heart, always looking out for others. He wasn't rich, far from it. His family struggled to make ends meet, but he had a quiet strength, the kind that made people trust him. That day on the bus, when he gave up his seat, he wasn't expecting anything in return. He was just doing what felt right. The woman on the bus, Claire, was in her late 30s, her face lined with exhaustion but softened by gratitude. She wasn't just any stranger, though Jordan had no way of knowing that. Her hand trembled slightly as she passed him the note, her eyes holding a strange intensity, like she was seeing something in him that he couldn't see himself. Jordan tucked the note into his pocket, planning to read it later. He didn't know that Claire had been carrying a secret for years, one tied to a past she'd tried to bury. That note wasn't just a thank you. It was a key, a spark that would ignite a chain of events no one could have predicted. When Jordan finally opened it, alone in his room that night, his hands shook. The words on the page were simple, but they hit like a thunderbolt. They didn't just change his day, they changed everything he thought he knew about himself, his family, and the life he'd been living. Back in Angela's town, the years had been unkind. The once vibrant community had grown quiet, the riverbank where the triplets disappeared now overgrown with weeds. But Angela never stopped searching. She'd put up flyers, called detectives, even followed leads that took her to dead ends. By 2011, 30 years after her boys vanished, she was tired, her hair graying, her eyes heavy with grief. But something was stirring. A chance encounter, a fleeting moment on a news report, caught her attention. It was about a young man in the city, a story of kindness that went viral, a black teen who gave up his seat on a bus and received a note that changed his life. Angela didn't know why, but something about the story tugged at her. Maybe it was the boy's face, or the way he carried himself. It was like seeing a ghost. Her heart raced as she dug deeper, chasing a feeling she couldn't explain. What was in that note? Why did it matter so much? And how could it possibly connect to 3 boys who disappeared 30 years ago? The answers were out there, buried in secrets, choices, and moments of kindness that rippled across time. Jordan's life was about to collide with Angela's in ways neither could imagine, and the truth about the triplets was closer than anyone realized. But the truth isn't always kind. It can tear open old wounds, force you to face things you've run from, and change everything you thought you knew. What did Claire know? And why did her note set everything in motion? I'm not going to spoil it here because this story is just getting started. Hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, and stick around for the next part, because what Angela discovers next will leave you speechless. Jordan sat on the edge of his bed, the crumpled note still in his hand, his heart pounding like it was trying to break free. The words on the paper were burned into his mind. You're not who you think you are. Find Angela Carter in Willow Creek. She's been looking for you. It didn't make sense. He was just a kid from the city, raised by his grandma after his mom passed when he was a baby. His life was simple: school, helping at the corner store, dreaming of maybe one day getting out of the cramped apartment he shared with his grandma and little sister. Who was Angela Carter? And why did this woman, Claire, think he needed to find her? The note felt like a puzzle piece from someone else's life, but the way his stomach twisted told him it was real. He glanced at the clock, past midnight now, and the city outside his window hummed with distant sirens and the faint glow of streetlights. He couldn't sleep, not with those words looping in his head. He folded the note and tucked it into his pocket, like keeping it close would somehow make it less heavy. Tomorrow, he'd figure out what to do. Maybe it was a mistake, a mix-up. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. Back in Willow Creek, Angela was wide awake too, her small living room lit only by the flicker of the TV. The news story about the boy on the bus played on a loop in her mind. She didn't know why it hit her so hard. Maybe it was the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, or the way he stood, shoulders back but not cocky, just like her boys used to. She pulled out an old photo album, its pages worn from years of being opened and closed. There they were, Malik, Marcus, and Micah, frozen in time at 9 years old, grinning at the camera with popsicles dripping down their chins. She traced their faces with her finger, her throat tight. 30 years. 30 years of not knowing if they were out there, somewhere, or if they were gone forever. The police had given up long ago, calling it a cold case, but Angela never could. She'd followed every lead, no matter how small: newspaper clippings, psychics, even a sketchy private investigator who took her money and disappeared. Now, this new story about a kind-hearted teen felt like a thread she couldn't ignore. She didn't know how, but she felt it in her bones. This boy, Jordan, was connected to her boys. Willow Creek wasn't the same place it had been in 1981. Back then, it was a tight-knit town where kids played outside until the streetlights came on, and neighbors left their doors unlocked. The disappearance of the triplets changed all that. People started locking their doors, eyeing strangers with suspicion. The riverbank where the boys were last seen became a place folks avoided, overgrown with thorns and rumors. Some said the triplets had drowned, their bodies swept away by the current. Others whispered darker things: kidnapping, runaways, even stories of a drifter who'd been seen near the river that summer. Angela had heard it all, and none of it brought her closer to the truth. She'd spent years walking that riverbank, calling their names into the wind, hoping for a sign. Now, in 2011, the town was quieter, smaller, with half the shops on Main Street boarded up. But Angela still lived in the same house, the one she'd raised her boys in, because moving felt like giving up. Jordan, meanwhile, was trying to make sense of the note. He didn't know anyone named Angela Carter, and Willow Creek was just a name on a map, a small town hours away from the city. He thought about showing the note to his grandma, but something stopped him. Grandma Rose was tough, the kind of woman who could stretch $1 to feed a family and still have change left over. But she didn't talk much about the past, especially not about Jordan's mom. All he knew was that his mom, Lena, had died in a car accident when he was a baby, and Grandma Rose had raised him ever since. There were no pictures of Lena in the house, no stories about what she was like. When Jordan asked, Grandma Rose would get quiet, her eyes far away, and say, "Some things are better left alone." Now, with this note in his pocket, those words felt like a warning. The next morning, Jordan couldn't shake the urge to do something. He wasn't the type to sit still, never had been. So he grabbed his phone and started searching for Willow Creek and Angela Carter. The town's name popped up in old news articles, most of them about the triplets who vanished in 1981. Jordan read the headlines, his pulse quickening. 3 brothers disappear without a trace. Willow Creek mourns missing triplets. The articles were short, repeating the same facts. Malik, Marcus, and Micah Carter. Last seen playing near the river, no evidence found. Case still unsolved. There was a picture of their mom, Angela, from back then, younger, her face drawn with worry, holding up a photo of her boys. Jordan stared at the screen, a strange feeling creeping over him. He didn't know why, but he felt like he knew her, like her face was familiar in a way that made no sense. Back in Willow Creek, Angela was making calls. She tracked down the reporter who covered the bus story, a young woman named Sarah who worked for a local news station in the city. Sarah was kind but skeptical when Angela explained why she was calling. I need to know more about that boy, Angela said, her voice shaking. Something about him feels like it's connected to my sons. Sarah hesitated, then promised to dig into it. She didn't tell Angela that she'd already been trying to find Jordan for follow-up story. His act of kindness had gone viral, shared across social media with hashtags like #BusHero and #KindnessMatters. People wanted to know more about the teen who'd given up his seat and what was in the note that had left him so shaken. Sarah had a hunch there was more to the story, but she hadn't expected it to lead to a 30-year-old mystery. Jordan decided to take a bus to Willow Creek. He didn't tell Grandma Rose. He knew she'd try to stop him, or worse, ask questions he didn't have answers for. He packed a small bag, just a change of clothes and the note, and used his savings to buy a ticket. The ride was long, the scenery shifting from concrete and neon to rolling fields and quiet towns. As the bus rolled into Willow Creek, Jordan felt a knot in his stomach. The town looked like it was stuck in time, with faded signs and empty storefronts. He didn't know where to start, but the note had said to find Angela Carter, so that's what he'd do. He asked around at the gas station, and an older man with a gray beard pointed him toward a small house on the edge of town. That's Angela's place, he said, his voice low. She's been through a lot, kid. Be kind. Angela was in her garden when Jordan arrived, pulling weeds with a focus that kept her mind from wandering to dark places. She looked up as he approached, her hands freezing mid-motion. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Jordan shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say. Hi, he started, his voice cracking. Are you Angela Carter? She nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. There was something about him, the way he stood, the curve of his jaw, that made her heart skip. Who are you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jordan hesitated, then pulled the note from his pocket. I got this from a woman on a bus. She said to find you. Angela's hands trembled as she took the note, her eyes scanning the words. Her breath caught, and she looked at Jordan like she was seeing a ghost. The note wasn't just a message. It was a bridge between two worlds, one in the city and one in Willow Creek, separated by 30 years and 1,000 unanswered questions. Angela didn't know how this boy was connected to her sons, but she felt a pull, a need to find out. She invited Jordan inside, her hands still shaking as she read the note again. They sat at her kitchen table, the air thick with silence. Jordan told her about the bus, the pregnant woman, the note. Angela listened, her face pale, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. When he finished, she didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she said, I don't know what this means, but you look like them. Jordan frowned. Like who? Angela's eyes filled with tears. My boys. Malik, Marcus, and Micah. They disappeared 30 years ago. Jordan's mind reeled. He didn't understand. How could he be connected to kids who vanished before he was born? But Angela's eyes held a certainty that scared him. She told him about the triplets, their laughter, their kindness, and the day they disappeared. She showed him the photo album, and Jordan's breath caught. The boys in the pictures looked like any kids, but there was something about their smiles that felt familiar. He couldn't explain it. Angela's voice was steady but raw as she talked about the search, the dead ends, the years of not knowing. I never stopped looking, she said. And now you're here, with this note. It's not a coincidence. Jordan wanted to argue, to say it was impossible, but the note in his pocket and the look in her eyes made him doubt everything. Across town, Sarah the reporter was digging through old files at the Willow Creek Library. She'd promised Angela she'd look into the story, but her own curiosity was driving her now. The Triplets case was a local legend, but the details were thin. The police reports from 1981 mentioned a few witnesses, a fisherman, a couple of kids, but no solid leads. Sarah found an article about a woman named Claire Thompson, a young teacher who'd left town shortly after the disappearance. The name stuck with her. Claire. Could it be the same Claire who gave Jordan the note? It seemed like a stretch, but Sarah's instincts told her to keep digging. She called a contact at the city news station, asking for any records on a Claire Thompson. If she could find her, Maybe she could find answers. Back at Angela's house, the conversation was heavy. Jordan felt out of place, like he'd walked into someone else's life by mistake. Angela kept staring at him, her eyes searching for something he couldn't name. "Why would this woman give me your name?" he asked. Angela shook her head. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." She told him about the news story, how his act of kindness had spread online. "Maybe she saw you on the news," Angela said. "Maybe she knew something about my boys." Jordan's head spun. He didn't know what to believe, but the note felt like a weight he couldn't shake. He thought of Grandma Rose, the way she avoided questions about his mom. Was there something she wasn't telling him? As the sun set over Willow Creek, Jordan and Angela sat in silence, the note on the table between them. Outside, the crickets chirped, and the air felt thick with secrets. Jordan wanted to go home, to forget the note and this strange town, but he couldn't. Not now. Angela's eyes were locked on him, filled with a mix of hope and fear. "You're not leaving tonight," she said softly. "Stay here. We'll figure this out together." Jordan nodded, unsure of what else to do. The truth was out there, somewhere, but it felt like a storm waiting to break. What did Claire know? How did she know Angela? And what did any of this have to do with 3 boys who vanished 30 years ago? The answers were close, but they were dangerous, and neither Jordan nor Angela was ready for what was coming. The air in Angela's kitchen felt heavier as the night deepened, the ticking of an old clock on the wall the only sound breaking the silence. Jordan sat across from her, his hands fidgeting with the edge of the table, the note still lying between them like an unspoken challenge. He wanted to ask 100 questions, but every time he opened his mouth, the words stuck. Angela's eyes kept drifting to the photo album, open to a picture of her triplets laughing in a field, their faces lit by a summer sun that seemed so far away now. She hadn't said much since Jordan showed her the note, but her silence was loud, filled with a hope she was afraid to name. "You said this woman, Claire, gave you the note," Angela finally said, her voice low. "What did she look like?" Jordan shrugged, trying to piece together the memory. "She was tired, I guess. Pale, like she hadn't slept. Her hair was dark, pulled back. She didn't say much, just looked at me like she knew me." Angela's fingers tightened around her coffee mug. "Claire Thompson," she murmured, almost to herself. She was their teacher. She left town right after they disappeared. Jordan's stomach twisted. "You think it's the same Claire?" Angela didn't answer right away. She stood and walked to a drawer, pulling out a faded newspaper clipping. It was an article from 1981, a small mention of the triplets' disappearance, and there, in the corner, was a photo of a young woman with dark hair, standing with a group of volunteers. "This is her," Angela said, sliding the clipping toward Jordan. He stared at the grainy image, his mind racing. The woman from the bus could be her, older now, worn by time. But why would a teacher from 30 years ago track him down on a city bus and hand him a note? What did she know? Angela's voice broke through his thoughts. "She was good to my boys. Always brought them extra books, stayed late to help them with homework. But after they vanished, she was gone. No goodbye, no nothing. I always wondered why." Jordan's mouth felt dry. "You think she knows what happened to them?" Angela's eyes met his, sharp and searching. "I think she knows something. And I think it's why she found you." In the city, Sarah the reporter was burning the midnight oil, her laptop screen casting a blue glow across her cluttered apartment. She'd spent hours combing through old records, chasing the name Claire Thompson. The trail was thin, but she'd found a few breadcrumbs, a teaching certificate from the early 80s, a marriage record from 1983, and then nothing until a recent address in the city, under the name Claire Reynolds. Sarah leaned back in her chair, chewing on a pencil. It was probably the same woman, but the name change made things tricky. Why had Claire left Willow Creek so suddenly? And why resurface now, giving a cryptic note to a random kid? Sarah's gut told her this wasn't just a feel-good story about a kind teen. There was something bigger here, something tied to the triplets case. She sent a text to her contact at the police department, asking for any old files on Claire Thompson or the Carter triplets. If there was a connection, she'd find it. Back in Willow Creek, Jordan couldn't sleep. Angela had given him the guest room, a small space with a single bed and a window overlooking the dark riverbank in the distance. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, the note burning a hole in his pocket. He kept thinking about Grandma Rose, about the way she'd shut down whenever he asked about his mom. Lena had died when he was a baby, that's what she always said. A car accident, quick and tragic. But now, with Angela's words ringing in his ears, "You look like them. doubt crept in. What if there was more to it? What if Grandma Rose knew something she wasn't telling him? He pulled out his phone and hesitated, his thumb hovering over her number. It was late, and she'd be worried sick if she knew he was in Willow Creek. But he needed answers. He typed a quick text. I'm okay, just staying with a friend. Be home soon. He hit send before he could change his mind, but the knot in his chest didn't loosen. Angela, meanwhile, was downstairs, pacing the living room. The photo album was still open, and every time she passed it, her heart ached. She'd spent 30 years chasing shadows, clinging to the hope that her boys were out there. She'd imagined them growing up, starting lives of their own, maybe even forgetting her. But the idea that Jordan, this boy who'd walked into her life with a note, could be tied to them, it was too much to process. She didn't want to scare him, but she couldn't let him go, not yet. She remembered Claire Thompson's face, the way she'd been so kind to the triplets, always bringing them little gifts, a notebook for Malik, who loved to draw, a puzzle book for Marcus, who was always thinking, a toy car for Micah, who dreamed of racing. When Claire left town, Angela had been too lost in grief to question it. Now, she wished she'd pushed harder. What did Claire know? And why had she sent Jordan to her? In the city, Grandma Rose wasn't sleeping either. Jordan's text had woken her, and now she sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea. She'd raised Jordan like her own, pouring everything she had into keeping him safe, giving him a life free of the pain she'd carried. But the past was stubborn, always clawing its way back. She'd told Jordan his mom died in a car accident because it was easier than the truth, easier than explaining the things she'd buried deep. Lena, her daughter, had been troubled, always running from something, memories, choices, maybe even herself. When Lena died, Rose had taken Jordan in, vowing to protect him from whatever had haunted his mother. But now, with Jordan gone and that vague text lighting up her phone, she felt the past creeping closer. She didn't know about the note or Willow Creek, but she knew Jordan wasn't the type to run off for no reason. Something was pulling him, and it scared her. The next morning, Jordan woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Angela moving around the kitchen. He felt out of place, like he was trespassing in someone else's story. Over breakfast, Angela was quiet, her eyes red from lack of sleep. I called a friend at the police station, she said finally. He's going to look into Claire Thompson, see if he can find her. Jordan nodded, unsure what to say. He wanted to help, but he didn't know how. What were they like? He asked, his voice soft. Your boys. Angela's face softened, a small smile breaking through. They were everything. Malik was the artist, always sketching. Marcus was the thinker, always asking questions. Micah was the dreamer, always talking about adventures. They were so different, but they were one unit. You couldn't have one without the others. Her voice cracked, and she looked away. Jordan felt a pang in his chest. He didn't know why, but he wanted to fix this for her, even if he didn't understand how. Sarah, meanwhile, was making progress. Her police contact had sent her a scanned copy of an old report, a witness statement from 1981. It was from a fisherman who'd been near the river the day the triplets disappeared. He'd seen a woman with dark hair talking to the boys, leading them toward a car. The description was vague, but it mentioned a blue sedan and a woman who seemed nervous. The report noted that the woman matched Claire Thompson's description, but she'd been questioned and cleared. No evidence, no motive. Sarah's pulse quickened. Why would Claire, a teacher, be leading the boys to a car? And why leave town right after? She tracked down Claire's current address and decided to pay her a visit. If Claire was the key to this mystery, Sarah wasn't going to let her slip away again. Back in Willow Creek, Jordan and Angela decided to visit the riverbank where the triplets were last seen. It felt like a long shot, but Angela thought it might jog something in Jordan's memory, even if he didn't know why. The riverbank was overgrown, the old oak tree still standing but scarred by time. Jordan walked slowly, his sneakers sinking into the damp earth. He didn't know what he was looking for, but the place felt heavy, like it was holding on to secrets. Angela pointed to a spot near the water.
This is where they were playing, she said.
They loved it here. I used to tell them to stay away from the river, but they were kids. They didn't listen. Her voice broke, and Jordan reached out, touching her arm. I'm sorry, he said, and he meant it. He didn't know what it was like to lose someone like that, but he could feel her pain, raw and real. As they stood there, Jordan's phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, the reporter. Found something about Claire. Call me. Jordan's heart raced. He showed the text to Angela, whose eyes widened. She's onto something, Angela said, her voice urgent. We need to talk to her. They headed back to the house, the air between them charged with a new energy. Jordan didn't know what Sarah had found, but he could feel the pieces of this puzzle starting to come together, even if they didn't fit yet. Claire Thompson, the triplets, the note, it was all connected, but how? And what did it have to do with him? Back in the city, Grandma Rose was packing a bag. She didn't know where Jordan was, but she wasn't going to sit and wait. She'd lost too much already, and she wasn't losing him too. The day passed in a blur of phone calls and questions. Sarah met with Claire at a small coffee shop in the city, her recorder hidden in her bag. Claire looked older than her years, her hands nervous as she stirred her coffee. I don't know why you're digging this up, Claire said, her voice tight. It's in the past. But Sarah pressed, mentioning the note, Jordan and Angela. Claire's face paled, and for a moment, Sarah thought she might bolt. I did what I had to, Claire said finally, her voice barely audible. I didn't mean for things to go so far. Sarah leaned forward, her heart pounding. What did you do, Claire? But Claire stood, grabbing her coat. I can't. Not yet. She left before Sarah could stop her, leaving more questions than answers. In Willow Creek, Jordan and Angela sat on the porch, waiting for Sarah's call. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Jordan felt like he was standing on the edge of something big, something that could change everything. Angela reached for his hand, her grip firm. Whatever happens, she said, we're in this together now. Jordan nodded, but his mind was on the note, on Claire, on the triplets. The truth was out there, closer than ever, but it felt like a storm cloud, dark and heavy, ready to burst. What had Claire done? And why did Jordan feel like his whole life was about to unravel? The sun had barely risen over Willow Creek when Jordan and Angela sat at the kitchen table, their coffee untouched, the weight of Sarah's text from the night before hanging heavy between them. Jordan's phone sat on the table, its screen dark but buzzing with the promise of answers. Sarah had called late, her voice rushed, saying she'd found something big about Claire Thompson but needed to meet in person to explain. It's not safe to talk over the phone, she'd said, her words sharp with urgency. Jordan didn't know what that meant, but it sent a chill down his spine. Angela's hands were clasped tight, her knuckles pale, her eyes fixed on the old photo album that hadn't left the table since Jordan arrived. She knows something, Angela said, her voice barely above a whisper. Claire was there, Jordan. She was with my boys that day. Jordan's throat tightened. He wanted to ask how she was so sure, but the look in her eyes, part hope, part fear, kept him quiet. The note in his pocket felt like a live wire, crackling with secrets he wasn't sure he wanted to uncover. Sarah was already on her way to Willow Creek, her car speeding through the early morning fog, her notebook stuffed with scribbled leads. The fisherman's report from 1981 was the key. She'd reread it a dozen times, each word fueling her suspicion. Claire Thompson had been seen with the triplets near the river, leading them toward a blue sedan. The police had dismissed it, saying Claire had no reason to harm the boys, but Sarah wasn't so sure. She tracked down another piece of the puzzle, a marriage certificate linking Claire Thompson to a man named Daniel Reynolds, a drifter who'd been in Willow Creek that summer. Daniel had a record, petty theft, a bar fight, but nothing solid tying him to the triplets' disappearance. Still, Sarah's gut screamed that Claire's sudden departure from town wasn't a coincidence. And that note she gave Jordan? It was a confession, a clue, or maybe a warning. Sarah gripped the steering wheel, her heart racing. She had to get to Angela and Jordan before Claire disappeared again. Back at Angela's house, the air was thick with tension. Jordan couldn't sit still. He paced the living room, his sneakers squeaking on the worn floorboards. What if Sarah's wrong? He said, more to himself than to Angela. What if this Claire lady just made a mistake? Angela shook her head, her voice firm. She didn't find you by accident, Jordan. That note, she wrote my name, my town. She wanted you to come here. Jordan stopped pacing, his eyes meeting hers. But why me? I'm nobody. I'm just some kid from the city. Angela stood, crossing the room to him, her hands gripping his shoulders. You're not nobody. You look like them. My boys. I don't know how, but you're connected to them. I feel it. Her words hit Jordan like a punch. He wanted to argue, to say it was impossible, but the note, the photo album, the way Angela looked at him, it was all too much. He felt like he was drowning in someone else's story. Meanwhile, Grandma Rose was on a bus headed to Willow Creek. She'd pieced together Jordan's whereabouts from his vague text and a call to his friend at the corner store, who'd mentioned Jordan buying a ticket to some small town. Rose didn't know why he'd gone, but the fear in her chest was growing. She'd spent years shielding Jordan from the truth about his mother, Lena, because the truth was a wound that never healed. Lena hadn't died in a car accident. That was the story Rose told to protect him. The real story was messier, darker, tied to choices Lena made and people she ran from. Rose stared out the bus window, the fields blurring past, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. She'd lost her daughter to secrets. She wasn't going to lose Jordan too. But as the bus rolled closer to Willow Creek, she felt a sinking dread, like she was heading towards something she'd spent decades trying to outrun. In the city, Claire Reynolds sat alone in her small apartment, the curtains drawn, a half-empty coffee cup on the table. She hadn't slept since her meeting with Sarah at the coffee shop. The reporter's questions had ripped open old wounds, ones Claire had buried under years of guilt and silence. She'd seen Jordan on the news, his kind face splashed across social media, and it had been like seeing a ghost. He wasn't just a random teen, he was a mirror to the past, to the boys she'd failed. She'd written the note on impulse, her hands shaking as she passed it to him on the bus. It was a reckless move, but she couldn't carry the weight anymore. She'd spent 30 years running from Willow Creek, from Angela, from the truth about that day by the river. Now it was catching up. She glanced at the phone, knowing Sarah or Angela would come for her soon. Part of her wanted to run again, but another part, the part that had loved those boys like her own, wanted to finally tell the truth. Back in Willow Creek, Sarah's car pulled up outside Angela's house just as the morning sun broke through the clouds. Jordan and Angela were waiting on the porch, their faces tense. Sarah didn't waste time with greetings. "I found Claire," she said, her voice low, like she was afraid someone might overhear. "She's in the city, and she's scared. I think she knows what happened to your boys, Angela. But there's more." She pulled out the fisherman's report, handing it to Angela. "This says Claire was seen with them that day, leading them to a car. And I found a connection to a man named Daniel Reynolds. He was her husband, and he was in town when the triplets disappeared." Angela's hands shook as she read the report, her breath catching. "Daniel," she whispered. "I remember him. He was a handyman, worked odd jobs around town. Quiet guy, kept himself." Jordan's head snapped up. "You think he had something to do with it?" Sarah nodded slowly. "Maybe. But Claire's the key. She's hiding something." The three of them sat in Angela's living room, the air charged with anticipation. Sarah laid out everything she'd found. The marriage certificate, Daniel's record, Claire's sudden departure. Jordan listened, his heart pounding. He didn't know how he fit into this, but the note in his pocket felt like a ticking bomb. "We need to talk to her," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. Angela nodded, her eyes fierce. "I've waited 30 years. I'm not waiting anymore." They agreed to drive to the city that afternoon to confront Claire. But as they planned, Jordan's phone buzzed again. It was Grandma Rose, her name lighting up the screen. He hesitated, then silenced the call. He couldn't face her yet, not until he had answers. Angela noticed, but didn't push. "You okay?" she asked. Jordan nodded, but he wasn't. The truth was closing in, and he wasn't sure he was ready for it. As they prepared to leave, a knock at the door startled them. Angela opened it to find Tom, her old friend from the police station, his face grim. "I looked into Claire Thompson like you asked," he said, stepping inside. "There's something you need to know. We found a record from '81, buried deep. It wasn't in the main file." He handed Angela a folder, his hands steady, but his eyes uneasy. Inside was a report, marked confidential, about a blue sedan found abandoned a few towns over, days after the triplets vanished. The car was registered to Daniel Reynolds. Angela's breath hitched. "Why wasn't this followed up?" she demanded. Tom shook his head. No evidence tied it to the boys. No witnesses, no prints. And Daniel was gone by then. So was Claire. Jordan's stomach churned. So, they just let it go. Tom sighed. "It was a different time, kid. We didn't have the resources." Angela's hands clenched the folder, her voice shaking. "They were my boys. They deserved better." The drive to the city was tense, the car filled with silence and unspoken fears. Jordan sat in the back, staring out the window, the note burning in his pocket. Angela drove, her hands tight on the wheel, her mind racing with memories of her boys and questions about Claire. Sarah sat beside her, going over her notes, trying to piece together a timeline. They were so close to answers, but every step forward felt like walking toward a cliff. When they reached Claire's apartment building, The air felt electric, like a storm was about to break. Jordan's heart pounded as they climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. Sarah knocked on Claire's door, but there was no answer. She knocked again harder. Finally, the door creaked open, and Claire stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice trembling. Angela stepped forward, her voice steady but sharp. "You knew my boys.
You know what happened to them?"
And you're going to tell me." Claire's eyes darted to Jordan, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. She looked at him like she was seeing someone else, someone from long ago. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice breaking. "I tried to protect them." Angela's hands shook, her voice rising. "Protect them from what? Where are my boys, Claire?" Jordan felt the room spin, the weight of the note, the photo album, the years of secrets pressing down on him. Claire opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, a car screeched to a stop outside. Jordan glanced out the window and saw Grandma Rose stepping out, her face set with determination. His heart stopped. She was here. Whatever truth was about to come out, it was going to change everything, and Jordan wasn't sure anyone was ready for it. The air in Claire's cramped apartment was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin prickle and your breath catch. Angela stood rigid, her eyes locked on Claire, demanding answers about her boys, Malik, Marcus, and Micah, who vanished 30 years ago. Claire's face was pale, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the doorframe, her words barely audible. "I tried to protect them," she repeated, her voice cracking like glass. Jordan stood frozen, his heart hammering, the note in his pocket feeling heavier with every second. He glanced out the window again, where Grandma Rose was striding toward the building, her face set with a determination that scared him. She didn't know about the note or Claire or the triplets, but her presence here now meant something was about to break. Before anyone could say another word, Claire's eyes widened, and she stepped back, her voice sharp. "You don't understand. It wasn't just me. There was someone else." Angela's breath hitched, her voice low and dangerous. "Who, Claire? Who took my boys?" But Claire's gaze darted to Jordan, and what she said next sent a shockwave through the room. "It was Lena. Your mother, Jordan." Jordan's world tilted. He staggered back, his mind reeling, the name hitting him like a punch to the gut. Lena, his mom, who Grandma Rose said died in a car accident when he was a baby. The room spun, Angela's sharp gasp barely registering. "What are you talking about?" Jordan stammered, his voice shaking. "My mom's dead. She's been dead my whole life." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back down. "She wasn't dead, Jordan. Not back then. She was with me that day, by the river. She was part of it." Angela's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes darting between Claire and Jordan, a new kind of fear creeping into her expression. Sarah, standing near the door, scribbled furiously in her notebook, her face pale but her reporter's instincts keeping her focused. "Lena, who?" Angela demanded, her voice trembling. Claire swallowed hard, her words coming slow, like they were being dragged out of her. "Lena Carter. Your cousin Angela. She was there when the boys disappeared." The revelation hung in the air like a storm cloud, dark and heavy, ready to burst. Jordan's knees felt weak, his mind scrambling to make sense of it. Lena Carter, his mom, was Angela's cousin? That meant the triplets, Malik, Marcus, and Micah, were his cousins too. He looked at Angela, whose face had gone ashen, her hands gripping the back of a chair to steady herself. "Lena was family," Angela whispered, her voice breaking. "She was troubled, always running off, but I never thought, not my boys." Jordan's head spun. Grandma Rose had lied, not just about the car accident, but about everything.
Why?
What was she hiding? And why was she here now, climbing the stairs to Claire's apartment? The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway, growing louder, and Jordan's heart pounded. He didn't know if he wanted to hug her or demand answers, but either way, the truth was closing in. Sarah broke the silence, her voice sharp with urgency. "Claire, you need to explain. What did Lena do? And what do you mean you tried to protect them?" Claire sank onto a chair, her hands covering her face. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said, her voice muffled. "Lena was young, reckless. She was mixed up with Daniel, my husband. He was trouble, always had been, but I didn't know how deep it went. That day by the river, I saw them with the boys. I thought they were just talking, but then they were gone." Angela's eyes blazed. "Gone where, Claire? Stop dancing around it." Claire flinched, her voice dropping to a whisper. I don't know. I swear. Lena said she'd take them somewhere safe, that Daniel had a plan. I didn't ask questions, I was scared. I should have stopped them, but I didn't. Jordan's stomach churned. His mom, Lena, involved in something that tore a family apart? It didn't make sense, but Claire's fear was real, and it was contagious. The door burst open, and Grandma Rose stood there, her eyes wild, her breath heavy from the climb. Jordan, she said, her voice sharp with relief and anger. What are you doing here? You need to come home now. She froze when she saw Angela, her face draining of color. Angela, she whispered, like the name was a ghost. Angela's eyes narrowed, her voice cold. Rose. You knew, didn't you? About Lena. About my boys. Rose's mouth opened, but no words came out. Jordan stepped forward, his voice shaking. Grandma, what's going on? Claire says my mom was involved, that she wasn't dead back then. Why did you lie to me? Rose's eyes darted to Claire, then back to Jordan, her hands trembling. I was protecting you, she said, her voice low. You don't know what Lena was like. She was broken, Jordan. She made mistakes, big ones. I couldn't let them touch you. Angela's voice cut through, sharp and raw. Mistakes? She took my boys, Rose. My babies. And you knew. The room felt like it was shrinking, the walls closing in as accusations flew. Jordan's head pounded, his thoughts a jumble of betrayal and confusion. His mom, Lena, wasn't just some tragic figure from a car accident. She was tied to the disappearance of Angela's triplets, his cousins. And Grandma Rose had kept it all from him. He looked at her, the woman who'd raised him, who'd bandaged his scraped knees and cheered at his school plays, and saw a stranger. What did she do, Grandma? He asked, his voice breaking. What happened to them? Rose's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. I don't know everything. Lena came to me after, said she'd made a mistake, that she was scared. She begged me to take you, to keep you safe. I didn't ask questions. I just wanted to protect you. Angela's hands clenched into fists, her voice shaking with rage. Protect him? What about my boys, Rose? Where are they? Claire stood, her voice cutting through the chaos. I don't know where they are now, but I know where they went that day. All eyes turned to her, the room falling silent. Daniel had a cabin up north, near the state line. He said it was a safe place, somewhere the boys could stay until things calmed down. Lena took them there. I didn't go, I couldn't. I was too scared of what I'd find. Sarah's pen stopped moving, her eyes wide. A cabin, she said. Do you know where it is? Claire nodded, her voice barely audible. I can draw a map. But I don't know if they're still there. I don't know if they ever left. Angela's breath caught, a flicker of hope warring with the fear in her eyes. You're taking us there, she said, her voice firm.
Now.
Jordan's heart raced as they piled into Sarah's car, Claire in the front, scribbling a rough map on a napkin. Rose insisted on coming, despite Angela's cold glare. I'm not letting Jordan out of my sight, Rose said, her voice steady, but her hands shaking. Jordan sat in the back, caught between his grandmother's secrets and Angela's desperation. The note in his pocket felt like it was burning, its words, "You're not who you think you are," echoing in his mind. Was he really connected to the triplets? Was his mom a monster who'd torn a family apart? The car sped through the city, then onto winding country roads, the landscape growing wilder with every mile. The cabin was hours away, hidden in the woods, a place that held answers or maybe just more pain. Sarah's hands gripped the wheel, her reporter's instincts on high alert. If we find that cabin, she said, we might find the truth. But we need to be ready for anything. As the car climbed into the hills, the air grew colder, the trees closing in around them. Jordan's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Stop looking. You're in danger. His breath caught, his eyes darting to the others. Should he tell them? Before he could decide, Claire's voice broke the silence, trembling but resolute. There's something else you need to know, she said, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Daniel didn't just take the boys to the cabin. He had help. Someone else was there, someone who wanted to keep it all quiet. Angela's head snapped toward her. Who? She demanded. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. Someone from Willow Creek. Someone you trusted. The words hit like a thunderbolt and Jordan's mind raced. Who else was involved? And why was someone warning him to stop? The cabin was close, the truth closer, but the danger was real, and it was coming for them all. The car wound deeper into the forested hills, the road narrowing to a rutted dirt path as the trees closed in, their branches scraping the windows like fingers. Jordan's heart pounded. The anonymous text stopped looking. "You're in danger," burning in his mind. He hadn't told the others, not yet, the words too heavy, too real. In the front seat, Claire clutched the napkin with her scribbled map, her hands trembling as she guided Sarah through the twists and turns. Angela sat beside Jordan, her face a mask of determination, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Grandma Rose was silent, her hands twisted in her lap, her gaze fixed on the darkening woods. The cabin was close now, a place that held the truth about Malik, Marcus, and Micah, the triplets who vanished 30 years ago. The air in the car was thick with unspoken questions, each mile pulling them closer to answers, or danger. Claire's last words echoed in Jordan's head. Someone from Willow Creek. Someone you trusted. Who could it be? And why did it feel like the truth was about to tear everything apart? The cabin came into view, a sagging wooden structure half hidden by overgrown pines, its windows dark and eerie. Sarah parked a short distance away, her reporter's instincts kicking in. "We need to be careful," she said, her voice low. "We don't know what's in there." Angela didn't hesitate, stepping out of the car, her eyes fixed on the cabin like it was the only thing in the world. "My boys were here," she said, her voice steady but raw. Jordan followed, his legs shaky, the note in his pocket feeling like a lead weight. Claire lagged behind, her face pale, muttering, "I didn't know it would come to this." Rose grabbed Jordan's arm, her grip tight. "Stay close to me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jordan nodded, but his mind was on the text, on his mom, Lena, and the secrets Grandma Rose had kept. The group moved toward the cabin, the crunch of leaves underfoot the only sound in the still evening air. Inside, the cabin was a time capsule, frozen in the early 80s. Dust-covered furniture, faded curtains, a stack of yellowed newspapers in the corner. Angela's breath caught as she spotted a child's drawing pinned to the wall, a crude sketch of 3 boys under a tree, signed with the names Malik, Marcus, and Micah. "They were here," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Jordan's heart raced as he scanned the room, his eyes landing on a small wooden box tucked under a table. He knelt, his hands shaking as he opened it. Inside were 3 small toys, a notebook, a puzzle book, and a toy car. Angela gasped, clutching the drawing to her chest. "Those were theirs," she said, her voice breaking. "My boys." Claire's eyes filled with tears, and she sank to the floor.
I'm so sorry, Angela.
"I didn't know what Daniel and Lena were planning. I thought they were just hiding them for a while." Sarah, ever the reporter, was already searching the cabin, her flashlight cutting through the shadows. She found a trapdoor under a rug, its edges worn but sturdy. "There's something below," she said, her voice tense. Angela nodded, her jaw set, and they pried it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading to a basement. The air grew colder as they descended, the smell of damp earth and something metallic filling their noses. At the bottom, they found a small room, its walls lined with old photographs and newspaper clippings about the triplets' disappearance. In the center was a table, and on it, a letter, its paper brittle but legible. Angela grabbed it, her hands trembling as she read aloud. "To whoever finds this, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. They're safe, but I can't come back. Lena." Jordan's breath caught. His mom's handwriting, unmistakable from the old birthday cards Grandma Rose had kept. Angela's voice shook with rage and grief. "Safe? Where, Lena? Where are my boys?" Claire broke down, sobbing. "I didn't know the whole plan," she said. "Daniel said it was about money, a ransom that never happened. Lena was supposed to take them to a friend in another state, someone who'd keep them hidden. But something went wrong. Daniel disappeared, and Lena, she ran. She left me a note, said she'd made a mistake, that the boys were safe, but she couldn't face you, Angela." Rose stepped forward, her voice quiet but firm. "She came to me after," she said, her eyes on Jordan. "She was scared, said she'd gotten in over her head with Daniel. She gave me you, Jordan, and told me to keep you safe. She said the boys were alive, but she wouldn't tell me where. Then she was gone." Angela's eyes blazed. "You knew, Rose. You knew, and you let me suffer for 30 years. Rose's face crumpled. "I didn't know where they were, Angela. I swear. I just wanted to protect Jordan." Jordan's head spun, the pieces falling into place, but leaving jagged edges. His mom, Lena, had taken the triplets, his cousins, to this cabin with Daniel, Claire's husband, in some botched plan. But they were alive, or had been. The letter said so. But where were they now? Sarah's flashlight caught something in the corner, a small metal box, locked tight. Jordan grabbed it, his hands shaking as he pried it open with a rusted screwdriver from the table. Inside was a photo, faded but clear. 3 young men in their 30s, standing together, smiling. On the back, in the same handwriting as the letter, were the words, Malik, Marcus, Micah. 2001. Angela's knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, clutching the photo. They're alive, she whispered, tears streaming. My boys are alive. Jordan's heart pounded. The men in the photo looked like him, same eyes, same smile. He was their cousin and they were out there somewhere. But before anyone could process the revelation, a noise came from above, a creak, like footsteps on the cabin floor. Sarah's flashlight snapped up, her voice sharp. Someone's here. Jordan's mind flashed to the text, You're in danger, and his stomach dropped. Claire's eyes widened, her voice a whisper. It's him. He's back. Angela stood, gripping the photo, her voice fierce. Who, Claire? Daniel? Claire shook her head, her face pale with terror. Not Daniel, the one who helped them. He's been watching all these years. The footsteps grew louder, deliberate, descending the stairs. Jordan's heart raced, his eyes darting to Grandma Rose, who looked as scared as he felt. Sarah grabbed a rusty pipe from the corner, her hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. Angela stepped in front of Jordan, protective, her voice low. Stay behind me. The figure emerged from the shadows, and Angela gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It was Tom, her old friend from the police station, the one who'd brought the report about the blue sedan. His face was grim, his eyes cold. You shouldn't have come here, Angela, he said, his voice low and menacing. I told you to let it go. Jordan's mind reeled, the final twist hitting like a sledgehammer. Tom, the trusted cop, the one who'd helped Angela search for years, was part of it. You? Angela whispered, her voice breaking. You knew where my boys were? Tom's jaw tightened, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. I didn't have a choice. Daniel had dirt on me, debts, mistakes. I helped him get the boys out of town, but I didn't know what he'd do after. I've been trying to keep this buried ever since. Claire sobbed, her voice shaking. I didn't know it was you, Tom. I swear. Jordan's heart pounded, the photo of the triplets in Angela's hand a lifeline to the truth, but Tom's presence a threat to everything. The basement of the cabin felt like a tomb, the air thick with betrayal and the weight of 30 years of secrets. Tom stood at the bottom of the stairs, his hand hovering over the gun at his hip, his cold eyes fixed on Angela, who clutched the photo of her triplets, Malik, Marcus, and Micah, taken in 2001, proof they'd been alive long after they vanished. Jordan's heart pounded, his mind reeling from the final twist. Tom, the trusted cop from Willow Creek, the man who'd helped Angela search for her boys, was part of the reason they were gone. Claire's sobs echoed in the dim room, her confession about Lena, Jordan's mom, and Daniel's still ringing in everyone's ears. Grandma Rose stood close to Jordan, her face pale, her hands trembling as she faced the truth she'd buried. Sarah gripped the rusty pipe, her reporter's instincts warring with fear. The anonymous text Jordan had received, "Stop looking. You're in danger," now made sickening sense. Tom had been watching, protecting his secret, and now they were all here, trapped with the truth. Angela's voice broke the silence, raw and fierce. You helped take my boys, Tom. My babies. And you stood by me, pretending to care, for 30 years. Her hand shook, the photo crumpling in her grip. Tom's jaw tightened, but his eyes flickered with something, guilt, maybe, or shame. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said, his voice low. Daniel had me cornered. I owed him money, big money. He said it was just a quick job, take the boys, hide them for a bit, get some cash from a ransom. But it went wrong. Lena panicked, Daniel disappeared, and I was left cleaning up the mess. Jordan's stomach churned. His mom, Lena, Angela's cousin, had been part of this, a botched kidnapping that tore a family apart. He looked at Grandma Rose, who'd lied to him his whole life about Lena's death. You knew, he said, his voice breaking. You knew she was involved, and you didn't tell me. Rose's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know everything, Jordan. Lena came to me, scared, with you in her arms. She said the boys were safe, but she couldn't go back. I thought I was protecting you. Sarah stepped forward, her voice sharp despite the pipe trembling in her hands. Where are they now, Tom? The photo says 2001. They were alive. Where are they? Tom's eyes darted to the photo, his face hardening. I don't know. After that summer, Daniel took them somewhere else. Lena wouldn't tell me where. I thought it was over, that they were gone for good. I stayed in Willow Creek to keep an eye on things, make sure no one dug too deep. Angela's voice was a whisper, laced with pain. You let me believe they were dead. You watched me cry, search, beg for answers. Tom looked away, his hand dropping from the gun, his shoulders sagging. I'm sorry, Angela. I was in too deep. I couldn't get out. But Angela wasn't listening. She turned to Claire, her eyes blazing. You said they went to a friend's. Who? Where are my boys? Claire wiped her tears, her voice shaky but resolute. Lena mentioned a woman, someone Daniel knew from another town. She called her Aunt May. I don't know her real name, but she lived in a small place called Harper's Grove, across the state line. That's where Lena said she took them. Angela's breath caught, a flicker of hope breaking through her grief. Harper's Grove, she repeated, her voice trembling. Jordan's mind raced. The photo, the letter, the toys, it all pointed to the triplets being alive, at least as recently as 2001. But Tom's presence, his gun, and that warning text meant danger was still here. Sarah's eyes narrowed, her reporter's instincts kicking in. We need to go to Harper's Grove, she said. But first, we need to deal with him. She nodded toward Tom, her grip tightening on the pipe. Tom raised his hands, his voice steady but strained. I'm not here to hurt you. I just wanted to scare you off, keep this buried. But it's too late now. Jordan's heart pounded as he stepped forward, his voice shaking but firm. You don't get to walk away, Tom. You helped take them. You owe Angela the truth. Tom's eyes met Jordan's, and for a moment, he looked like a man who'd carried a burden too long. I'll tell you what I know, he said. But you won't like it. He sank onto a chair, his hands still raised, and began to talk. Daniel had been desperate for money, tangled in debts to dangerous people. The ransom was supposed to be quick, take the triplets, hide them, get paid. But the plan fell apart when the ransom demand was never made. Lena, young and scared, followed Daniel's lead, taking the boys to the cabin. When things went south, she handed them off to Aunt May, then ran, leaving Claire and Tom to cover their tracks. Tom stayed in Willow Creek, watching Angela, making sure no one got close to the truth. I didn't know where they went after, he said. I swear. Angela's hands clenched, her voice shaking with rage. You swear? You lied to me for 30 years, Tom. My boys were out there, and you let me think they were gone. She stepped toward him, but Sarah grabbed her arm, her voice calm but firm. We need him, Angela. He can help us find Harper's Grove. Jordan's mind was spinning. His mom, Lena, had been part of this, but she'd also written that letter, saying the boys were safe. Had she tried to make things right? He looked at Grandma Rose, who was crying silently, her face etched with guilt. Why didn't you tell me? He asked again, his voice softer now.
Rose shook her head.
I thought the truth would hurt you, Jordan. Lena was broken, running from her mistakes. I wanted you to have a clean start. Jordan's chest ached. He was angry, but he loved her, and he knew she'd done what she thought was right. They tied Tom's hands with an old rope from the cabin, Sarah keeping the pipe close as they led him back to the car. He didn't resist, his fight gone, his confession leaving him hollow. The drive to Harper's Grove was quiet, the tension thick as they followed Claire's directions to a small, run-down house on the edge of town. The sun was low now, casting long shadows over the overgrown yard. Angela knocked on the door, her hands trembling, the photo of her boys tucked in her pocket. An older woman answered, her face weathered, her eyes wary. Can I help you? She asked. Angela's voice was steady, but it carried 30 years of pain. I'm looking for my sons. Malik, Marcus, and Micah. They were brought here in 1981 by a woman named Lena. The woman, May, froze, her eyes darting to Claire, then Jordan. You shouldn't be here, she said, but her voice cracked, betraying her. May let them in, her hands shaking as she sat them down in a cluttered living room. I took them in, she said, her voice low. Lena begged me to keep them safe. Said it was temporary, that she'd come back. But she never did. Angela's breath hitched. Where are they now? May's eyes filled with tears. They grew up here, with me. I raised them as my own. They didn't know who they were. Lena said it was safer that way. They left when they were 18, started their own lives. I got that photo in 2001 from Malik. They were okay, living in different cities, but they stayed close to each other. Angela clutched the photo, tears streaming. They're alive. May nodded. They are. I can give you their addresses, but they don't know about you. Lena told them their mom was gone. Jordan's heart pounded. His cousins were alive, out there, living lives they didn't know were stolen. He looked at Angela, whose face was a mix of joy and pain. She'd found her boys, but they didn't know her, didn't know the mother who'd spent 30 years searching. Sarah scribbled notes, her eyes wide, already planning the story she'd write. Tom sat in silence, his head bowed, the weight of his role in this tragedy sinking in. Grandma Rose reached for Jordan's hand, her voice soft. I'm sorry, Jordan. I should have told you the truth about your mom. Jordan nodded, his throat tight. He was angry, but he loved her, and he knew she'd done what she thought was right. Claire, still crying, whispered, I didn't mean for this to happen. I love those boys. Angela didn't look at her, her focus on the addresses May wrote down, 3 names, 3 cities, 3 lives waiting to be reclaimed. They left Harper's Grove as the sun set, the car quiet but lighter, the truth finally free. Angela held the addresses like a lifeline, her hands steady now. I'm going to find them, she said, her voice firm. I'm going to tell them who I am. Jordan's mind was heavy with the weight of his mom's choices. Lena had been part of something terrible, but she'd also tried to protect the boys, leaving them with May, writing that letter to say they were safe. He didn't know if he could forgive her, but he understood her fear, her desperation. Sarah dropped Tom off at the Willow Creek police station, where he turned himself in, his confession recorded for the record. I'll tell them everything, he said, his voice hollow. It's time. Claire stayed behind, promising to cooperate with the investigation, her guilt a burden she'd carry forever. Grandma Rose and Jordan drove back to the city, the silence between them softer now, a bridge rebuilt. We'll find them together, Rose said, her hand on his. Jordan nodded, the note still in his pocket, its words no longer a mystery but a promise. Over the next weeks, Angela tracked down her sons. Malik was an artist in Chicago, his sketches filling a small gallery, each one carrying echoes of the boy who loved to draw. Marcus was a teacher in Seattle, always asking questions, just like Angela remembered, his classroom a place of curiosity and warmth. Micah was a mechanic in Denver, his hands steady as he fixed cars, dreaming of races he'd never run but smiling like the boy who'd loved adventure. They were hesitant at first, shocked to learn their mother was alive, that their childhoods were built on lies. But Angela's love, her years of searching, her unwavering hope, broke through their walls. She told them about Willow Creek, about the riverbank, about the mother who never stopped looking. They listened, their eyes wide, their hearts opening to a past they'd never known. The reunion happened in Willow Creek, under the old oak tree by the river, where it all began. Angela stood with Malik, Marcus, and Micah, their faces so like the boys in her photo album, now grown into men with lives of their own. Jordan was there, his cousin's smiles mirroring his own, a family tied by blood and secrets finally whole. Sarah's story went viral, a tale of kindness, betrayal, and redemption, with Jordan's act on the bus, the note that started it all, at its heart. The hashtags #Willow Creek Mystery and #Triplets Reunited trended for weeks, people moved by the power of a single act of kindness sparking a journey to truth. Claire faced charges for her role, but her cooperation and remorse softened the consequences. Tom was prosecuted, his career and reputation gone, his confession a small step toward justice. The final twist came months later, in a quiet moment that caught Angela off guard. A letter arrived at her house, postmarked years ago but only now delivered, found among May's belongings after her passing. It was from Lena, written in her shaky hand. I'm sorry, Angela, it read. I thought I was saving them, but I broke us all. I loved them and I loved Jordan. I was scared, lost, but I made sure they were safe with May. Keep Jordan safe for me. Angela cried as she read it, Jordan at her side, his heart aching for the mom he'd never known. Lena had made terrible choices, but she tried to make them right, leaving her son with Rose, ensuring the triplets were safe. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was understanding, a step toward healing.